Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. The response to last week's video was absolutely outrageous, especially in the comments section. Let's just say that, well, I guess folks, they can be extremely passionate about the camera brand they use, but there were many great questions posted that I do want to answer in this video that I think are helpful topics to discuss. And one of those most frequently asked questions was related to why I went with the Nikon Z8 over the Sony a7R5 or the Canon R5 for landscapes. But before I jump right into that one, that's a bit of a longer answer, I do want to touch upon a few of the other most common questions first. So the short answer is that the 250mm prime for a medium format camera is really, it's actually less than 200mm on a full frame equivalent, which is actually still in my opinion, a shorter telephoto lens. I love, really 200 to 400mm. That range is really the longer focal length that I enjoy most. So that's one part of it. Plus it's a prime lens, and I'm not a huge fan of prime lenses, especially telephoto primes, mainly because so if you have, let's say a 35mm prime or a 55mm prime, that's no problem in my opinion. I used to own both of those focal lengths when I first got started. Everything I shot with was a prime lens. So when you have a shorter focal length, you can zoom with your feet very easily. You can just move a couple feet forward, you can move a couple feet back just to kind of adjust your composition. But when you have telephoto primes, especially like a 500mm telephoto prime, that's a little bit harder to manipulate, to make adjustments with your feet. You could be walking quite a bit further, walking quite a bit further back. So there's not nearly as much flexibility there. Plus, it was very expensive. I think it was a $3,500 lens, so $1,000 more than the 100 to 400 that I have right here. Plus, it's not a zoom, it's a 500mm prime on a medium format camera. So neither one of those options, the 500mm prime or the 250mm prime, were really good solutions for me, in my opinion. And when they released the 500mm prime, that was actually one of the reasons why I was like, you know what, there is not going to be a longer zoom lens for the GF system. It's nothing against Fuji, it's just the nature of a medium format camera. If you want to get anything equivalent to a 100 to 400mm zoom lens for a medium format camera, that lens is going to be insanely big. It's going to be insanely heavy, and it's going to be a whole lot of money as well. So that's why neither one of those options really would work well for me. Another question was the insane cropping ability. So, a 102 megapixel medium format sensor, you could really crop in a lot. You could almost take one photograph and crop it into two separate images. So having that flexibility in the digital darkroom, if you will, to make composition changes after the fact is probably going to be the number one thing that I'm going to miss. Sure, the dynamic range was a little bit better than the Nikon Z8, so I'll probably have to bracket a little bit more with this camera versus the GFX 100S. Not a huge deal, but those are probably the two things I'm going to miss the most. But, I've talked about this before, the perceived difference. So what you can actually see, not necessarily what a spec sheet shows you, but what you can actually see with your naked eye. In all honesty, if you have a 10 megapixel photo and a 20 megapixel photo, there's a pretty big difference right there. But once you start to get in that 40, 60, 80, 100 megapixel range, the difference is in there. You really can't see that well unless you're actually pixel peeping. So this right here, I believe, is 45 megapixels. This is more than enough when you look at it like a normal photographer does. Sure, if you compared this with the GFX 100S and you zoomed all the way in, you could start to see a difference there. But there's only one person or one type of people out there that look at photos like that, and that's probably you and me. It's photographers. Photographers are the ones that do the pixel peeping. We're the ones that zooming all the way in, looking at every little detail. But when you look at it like a normal person does, it's really, really hard to see the difference. Now, as far as the big question, this is hands down the most common question is, Mark, did you look at the Sony a7R5? Did you look at the Canon R5? Well, for one, the two that I looked at the most was definitely the Nikon Z8, the Z9, or the Sony a7R5. All of them are amazing cameras. The Z8 and the Sony a7R5, I believe the R5 is around 60 megapixels. This is 45 megapixels. That is pretty close. It might seem like a huge difference, but when you look at the files, you would be hard pressed to really see a difference. The dynamic range values are pretty much the same. Actually, I've heard that the Z8 has a little bit better dynamic range than the Sony a7R5. They both have amazing lenses available for them, but there were quite a few things about the Nikon Z8 that I really did enjoy, one of which is this right here, this sensor shield. But that sensor shield right there, I don't know why all cameras don't have this. I mean, you can just leave your sensor completely, or I should say, leave the lens cap off, and there's not going to be any dust that gets on your sensor at all. That is a huge benefit for especially landscape photographers. I don't know about you, but I change lenses pretty often when I'm in the field, and for some reason, I am always in this, I guess it's because light's changing, conditions changing quickly, so I'm always in this kind of a state of trying to change lenses quickly, and not having to worry about my sensor being exposed is a huge benefit. I think every camera should have that. That to me is absolutely fantastic. It's not the shutter being closed, it's a sensor shield, but its purpose is to really keep things off of your sensor when you're changing lenses, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. That is a huge benefit right there. I also really like just the overall feel of a camera. I'm not trying to get the smallest camera possible. Sony for years has always tried to make things smaller, especially cameras smaller and smaller. I used the Sony a7R II many years ago, which was an amazing camera as well, but it felt a little small, a little dainty in my hands. I have big hands. I like a camera that I can get a hold of. And I think the Z8, in my opinion, feels very good. It's definitely smaller than the DSLR, the D850, but it has an amazing grip, and I can just really get a hold of this, and it feels substantial in my hands, and I really do enjoy that. Now, I came from the Fuji GFX 100S, and I absolutely love the way that system works. And believe it or not, this Z8, from an ergonomics perspective, has so many things that are just like the GFX 100S. For one, this top screen right here is absolutely fantastic. I became so used to being able to see my controls on the top of this screen like the GFX 100S does, and the Nikon Z8 has that as well, which is absolutely huge. The other really big one here is that all of the lenses that I have for the Nikon Z8 all have an aperture ring on the lens. So you can change the aperture with the aperture ring right here on the lens, and I think that's amazing as well because all of my Fuji lenses had that as well. And it's something that I really got used to, and to me, that makes sense. You should have the aperture ring on the lens, on the aperture, and that just made sense to me. So that kind of muscle memory is really ingrained. So having the top screen, having the aperture dial on the actual, I should say the aperture ring on the lenses themselves, really make the transition from the GFX 100S to the Nikon Z8 almost seamless. And it's what, I used the term muscle memory before, and it's exactly what it is. It's all just muscle memory. The Nikon has, and I don't know, once again, I don't know why every camera doesn't have this, you can switch the on switch a little bit further to this little light bulb right here, and you won't be able to see it right now, but all of the buttons light up. It seems like such a small thing, but it is huge. I can't tell you how many times I have to take my phone out and use the flashlight to shine it on my camera to look for a certain button here or there. But being able to turn on all the lights that are all backlit lights, or backlit buttons, is a very, like I mentioned, small thing, but it really goes a long way. So I really like that. I think that the button layout and just the overall ergonomics of the Nikon Z8 is quite a bit better than the Sony a7R5. I have used the Sony a7R5. The Z8 definitely has more buttons. I like the better button placement. Just little things like this function button 1 and 2 right here by the lens. Like you have your hand right on the grip, your fingers are naturally going to lay on this function 1 and function 2 button here, and you can change that to whatever you want. You can customize those. So it's all those kind of little things. Joystick pad. There are a lot of things about the Z8 ergonomically that I really enjoy. That was not a stark departure from what I was used to, which is really nice. I do wish the Z8 had 2 SD card slots. This has got a CF Express and an SD card slot. Kind of wish there was 2. I only use SD cards. So that would be one thing I wish was a little bit different about the Z8, but it's not a game changer. But using the Sony a7R series, like I said, I have bigger hands. My hands just felt like they swallowed up that a7R series. At least the a7R II. I have held actually I have used this a7R5 before as well, and it just felt the same way. There is something about Sony cameras to me that are just not super enjoyable to use. Yes, they are incredible cameras. The G Master lenses are absolutely world-class as well. But the cameras just aren't a whole lot of fun to use. I loved using Fuji cameras. I've really enjoyed using this as well. There's just something about it, and some people don't care about that. Some people only care about the end result, the files that come out of the camera, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, I want to enjoy using the camera. I want to be excited to put this thing in my hands and get out there and make some photographs. So enjoying the camera, just the overall ergonomics and just the use of it is very, very important to me. I put a lot of weight in that, and I have really enjoyed using this for the past, I guess, month now, maybe. But it's definitely a lot of fun. I came from Nikon. I learned to edit photos years ago when I first started into landscape photography on a Nikon D3100. So that is where my, I guess, what is that term? You kind of cut your teeth with on Nikon files. I don't know if I said that right, but that's what I started out with. And when I started to edit these files again, it all kind of came back to me. They just edit very, very smooth. They edit very easily, and I really enjoy that. So it's something that I would definitely used to as well. What else? Oh, this is a big one too. So two things. One, did I grab the right one? No, I did not. This right here, the 14-24 S lens by Nikon, this right here almost has a cult-like following. I have heard people absolutely rave about this lens far before I even thought about switching to the Nikon Z8 or even making any camera change at all. I think it's been out for maybe almost a year now. And I've heard so many people talk about this. You know, a 24 to 105 is definitely a more common focal range, but to have a 24 to 120, that extra 20 millimeters is huge. And the versatility that this lens provides is off the charts. On top of the fact that it is an S-line lens, which means it's one of Nikon's best lenses that they offer. It is so sharp corner to corner. The contrast that this lens creates is incredible. So to have such a large focal range, that's not, 100 to 400 millimeters. It's, it can be very wide, it can be long-ish, and for the optical quality to be as good as it is, that is pretty impressive. I think Nikon did an absolutely amazing job. I feel so fortunate that I was even able to get one of these. This lens is sold out in quite a few spots, so it's definitely a very popular lens choice. But to be able to have 24 millimeters all the way to 400 millimeters in just these two lenses right here, that's pretty cool. I definitely put a lot of value in that. I think that is a very, very nice thing to have. Plus, this is $1,000 lens, 24 to 120. That's definitely a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not $3,500 and it's lightweight. So it is a very, very good value. And probably one of the biggest things is that, biggest things that I went with the Z8. The Z8 is basically a Z9. Just without the battery grip. So I think the value for the Z8 is definitely here. So the Z9 is $2,000 more than the Z8. But the only difference is just the battery grip. You don't get the battery grip with the Z8. So as far as just overall value, I think this is a better value than a Sony A7R5 because this is an absolute video monster of a camera. So it's incredible for stills. It's incredible for video. And this camera is definitely better for video than the A7R5. I'm not going to run through all the specs, but it is clear that this is a better hybrid option, a better value for me as well. And video is important. I have a YouTube channel. I'm constantly taking video as well. So to be able to have something that can shoot wildlife, that can shoot sports if I wanted to, landscapes, I can do video. This right here definitely seemed to be a better value at $3,500. I think I got it for $3,500. There was a sale that Nikon is having that I believe ran through the end of June. And the Sony A7R5, I think, is right around $4,000. So I was actually able to get this for almost $500 less than the Sony A7R5. So this right here undoubtedly seemed like a better value for my workflow. I'm trying to see, is there anything else? I know that was the main things that I covered. Yeah, that's really it. I never really considered the Canon R5. I believe that the newer version of that was just released, but I've never really used Canon. I didn't really look too seriously into that. I spent about maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour one day just looking at reviews of the R5, some spec sheet information about it, talked to some people that were loyal Canon users that I happen to know. But for me, it came down to the Sony a7R5 or the Nikon Z8. And I'm definitely happy that I went with the Nikon Z8. I absolutely love it so far. And I'm really looking forward to many, many years of hopefully making absolutely incredible artwork with it. So those are the answers to the most common questions from last week's video in regards to my switch from the Fuji GFX 100S medium format system to the full frame Nikon Z8 system. Now, before I do wrap things up, I do just want to say a big thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a robust and beautiful online platform to develop your website. You can showcase your photography using Squarespace's new Blueprint design system to help guide you through the options to building your online presence from the ground up. You can even display your photography using Squarespace's flexible website design templates and customize the layout in order to make it your own. And with Squarespace's online store feature, you'll have access to all the tools you need to start selling your physical goods, digital content, or service products online with ease. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So if you have any additional questions that I didn't answer in this week's video, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And as always, if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye.